Hello again, here with another book review. The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. Excuse my tiredness because I recently got back from work and I'm very tempted to take a nap, but then I was like, no, I know if I take a nap I'm just gonna sleep through the day and I'm not gonna let that happen. So I will try to keep myself awake the best I can, but that's my own problem. Yeah, Talented Mr. Ripley. Very unnerving. Those of you who probably heard of this, probably like myself, have heard it via the famous movie in 1999 starring Matt Damon, Jude Law, of course, Gwyneth Paltrow, one of the few roles where she actually puts on like a pretty good dramatic thing, whereas sometimes I feel like she's just phoning it in. No offense to her, but oh yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman's in that too as well. One of my favorite actors as well. And yeah, just a great movie. It's obviously there's some differences that's why it took me a little while to get to the book. And I did know that I did come into it knowing a little bit about Patricia Highsmith and knowing that she did, The Precious Salt, which is also made into a movie starring with Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, which is I really like that movie as well. I kind of I haven't started the book yet, so I'm not really sure the difference between that, but this in the book, so basically it's about a young man in his mid-20s by the name of Thomas Ripley, and he's living in New York, and he's struggling to make it in this society that's like a kind of very fast-paced, and he's like, in order to make ends meet, he kind of uses a variety of different kind of confidence scams to kind of buy people's confidence and in order to kind of win them over. And he starts out doing that, and then out of the blue, a man by the name of Herbert Greenleaf shows up, or Mr. Greenleaf as he's referred to in the novel. And he starts asking him like, hey, my son, Richard Greenleaf, or Dickie, as he's referred to, he's off and away in Italy, and he's being very frivolous and not really, he's not calling, he's not like answering letters, and he has this Herbert Greenleaf right off the bat. It's like one of the things that's like starkly contrasted with Thomas Ripley is the fact that he's very rich and wealthy, and he's got like this shipbuilding company that he has, and that's right off the bat you see kind of like the status difference between them. And here we have Thomas Ripley. He's like kind of, you start off kind of definitely on his side, or I was on his side at first. Like you're like, dang, he's really struggling to make it. He lives in this kind of really not horrible apartment, but very cramped, New York apartment. And so he's like kind of looking for any way he can to kind of, get a foot in the door, foot in the door, I guess, and to kind of, get his way and to kind of buy people. So he basically, at first he's skeptical of Mr. Greenleaf, but then he starts to really try to win his trust, and then he starts like kind of exaggerating the relationship he had with Dickie. And he's like, oh, I knew Dickie quite well, and we went out, and he starts charming him with all these like elaborate stories and about how how he and Dickie were good friends, and they both went to Princeton, I think, together. Not in actuality, like he only saw him like once or something at like a house party. So right off the bat you kind of see Thomas Ripley. He's trying to live a life that's like false and inauthentic. So so he agrees to Mr. Greenleaf agrees to pay for the trip, and she's like, yeah, you can head over there, spend as much time as you want, but your main kind of imperative is to find my son and to persuade him to come home, because like he won't listen to him. So he goes there, and and he's kind of gets a peep into the world of this very kind of wealthy kind of the free world. Everybody's so like kind of just almost like Dionysian like, and they have no responsibilities. Like they're just kind of freely just going about. Everybody's just living life up on the beach and like sunny and swimming, and they're all boating, and they're all just having a good time and, visiting Italian cafes and drinking and eating at really fancy foods and seafood. And basically, Tom Ripley is thrown in the middle of this, and he's kind of like at a loss. Well, not exactly. Well, he's resolved become to become someone he's not. Like, you always get kind of a facile artifice of who he really is. Like, he like doesn't lay his cards on the table. He's very opaque. Not opaque. Well, yeah, opaque maybe. He's veiling himself in order to kind of win people's trust a lot of the time. So he's like tries doing that with Dickie at first, and then Dickie and Marge in the first scene, like he really doesn't, when like they're flat out just ignore him, and then he's just ashamed of himself, and he spends like a day or two away from them, and kind of like comes up with like this like kind of a way to kind of persuade them, to cajole them into being like his friends. And it's like, how do I win them over? And then he starts like using his talent for impressions, which is why it's called the talented Mr. Ripley, is because he has like, he lists off like being all these different talents to Dickie, who's kind of a bit impervious to these things. Like, Dickie's like a very, free spirited kind of spur of the moment type guy, and he's like, quite garrulous and outgoing, and but he doesn't really catch on to what Tom Ripley is really planning on doing, which is a lot more sinister than it might appear. And he's like, he's just kind of like befriending people. Like, he's like, you also get, it's kind of a classic omniscient third person narrator, but you get like kind of a deep dive into what Thomas is thinking and what Dickie's thinking about it, especially Thomas. Like, you get like the sense that he's like almost resents at certain points, like Dickie real life, or I'm sorry, yeah, Dickie and Marge, like especially Marge. Like, he's like he can't stand her. Basically, he wants her to get out of the picture. In the movie, they accentuated this more. They made it like a blatantly, like he had like homosexual feelings for Dickie real life, which in the book was a lot more. I think I could be misreading it, but I think it was a lot more subdued and subtle. Like, it wasn't. It took a little while for me to kind of. Was he like, in the book, it was up in the air whether or not he was actually attracted to him in that way, or if he was just like trying to take over his life and basically, usurp everything that he had, and just liked the way he looked and kind of like liked the way he carried himself. But in this, you get in the movie, it's like a lot, especially during the pivotal scene, I guess, in the first act or the second, I think, or the one, with to spoil it, murder scene, basically, that was a lot different, because in this scene when he murders Dickie with the oar, like, he gets him on there, and it's almost like as if he's in the movie, it was a lot more like a crime of passion, but in the book it was a lot more measured. Like, he was like, and then I took the oar and then I made it look like an accident, and then he made it look like an accident, I think. And then, tried his best to wash the blood, whereas in the movie it was a lot more like like he was a very, of course, Jude Law, Matt Damon's performances really make that happen. And he's like, like certain things, like he sets him off by the way he acted towards him, and really kind of egged him on in a sense. And then, so you kind of feel a little bit bad for, obviously for Dickie for that fate, but at the same time for a little bit for, how Tom, you almost in the movie a little bit more kind of wanted him to get away with it in a sense, but but in the book, like, personally, I found the book at certain points to be really reprehensible. Like, I didn't identify with certain his motivations, because he's trying so hard to hanging by a thread, and he's like, certain points he said like, oh, the risk of it made this kind of fun, is what the narrator kind of or Patricia Highsmith kind of made that clear, is that he was that's what kind of made that lifestyle of roaming aimlessly, not aimlessly, but from hopping one point to the other in these different European places, and going to Italy and the Montebello place, which is loosely based off of this resort town in Italy, on, I think it's the east side of Italy, or maybe it's the west, I think, and how they're hopping from these different islands off the coast of Italy and going to France, and it's like very, and that's when I think Tom Ripley kind of starts like, you know, when he starts stealing Dickie's rings, like, I think that's the point in the novel that cements that, you know, he's not exactly like kosher what he's doing. He's planning on definitely doing some pretty shady stuff. And when he uh you know, goes on this thing with like Dickie, and like you can tell like part of him was hurt, like when he was rejected by Dickie, and like especially with Freddie Miles coming in too. Like Freddie Miles, like I also at certain points like you felt like he was a little bit, you know, obtuse. No, not obtuse. He was quite on, you know, he was obscene. He was a, you know, very licentious and kind of just like boisterous, and you know, school, like a really old time friend of Dickie's, and you know, he's going around and both of them are like having these great plans of like skiing and going to, you know, the Alps and doing, you know, all sorts of things in store, but you get the sense that later on that like Freddie Miles, what I love about his character, even though he's not exactly the most lovable character, but what I liked about that arc is the fact that he was made to be a lot more in tune and kind of on to Tom Ripley than a lot of the other characters. Like kind of Marge would just be like, oh, you know, like just buy into kind of everything she did, you know, bless her soul. And but Dickie was too kind of like, you know, like spread himself too thin and was like trying to do way too many things, and he's trying to be a painter, but he was kind of like a little bit on the mediocre side. Like he was always, his paintings were never quite good enough to kind of compete, but he loved it nonetheless, and he was trying to do that. But he was also, he kind of his own inability to kind of see that became his downfall. You know, not saying he deserved it all, but it was in a sense like a kind of an semi-ironic kind of ending, downfall. That I guess was his Achilles heel, was him not being able to fully catch on to what Thomas Ripley was really doing. And I never got the sense how much Ripley actually liked Dickie Greenleaf. Was it because I don't know if Patricia Highsmith just like made this kind of ambivalent on purpose, like the fact that he subsumed or took over his life and he starts living it out, and he's like feels a lot more confident. He goes to bars, and you know, he talks like Dickie, and he already has a passing resemblance, so that's kind of in his favor. And then he starts dyeing his hair blonde, kind of a blonde tint like Dickie, and then you know, so he clearly admired him to some extent, but at the same time he was so desperate to get rid of anybody that was in his way. Like it was like very utilitarian, like, oh crap, like we have too much damage control, we have to get things out of the, you know, we have to get, if this person knows about it like this, and this person, like they're going to trace back the fingerprints to me. And then like especially with you know, Freddie Miles' murder, which I felt, you know, like even Ripley said it was like superfluous, like he didn't need to actually kill him. A bit like Raskolnikov with Liza in Crime and Punishment, like he didn't quite need to kill her. She was like kind of like damage control, like I said. But yeah, Freddie Miles, like he just gets like, you know, like hit in the head, I think. In the movie, or I think it was in the movie and in the book, he got hit in the head by this like sculpture bust of a like a Roman bust of some sort, and he's like bleeding and lying on the ground. And then this new apartment / house that he gets, and then he tries to kind of shack up there. I actually don't really hate that term, shack up, but he tries to. It's confusing exactly the order of events, what happens, but he's like trying to kind of stay with Dickie, and pose as Dickie in order to write out the letters to Marge to make it seem as if he's still in there, because he's also, that's one of his talents too in town. Mr. Ripley is, he actually is able to copy, like right down to the, you know, like the last I, and what, you know, his handwriting, and is able to write these letters and to keep on appearances with Marge. And finally it ends, he's able to make the chronology of events make it seem as if Dickie killed himself, and that's why, you know, he goes back into being the old Tom Ripley, and he has to kind of take off that mask, you know, and being that kind of the more kind of boring, pathetic. I just love that part of the movie. It's so like, it hits really hard. It's just like, you're so boring, and you're like, so you're like, it's like, you're such a leech, you can be that, you know that, you know that, Tom, you can be a leech. And like, it's like, yeah, it's like, do you feel bad for him that he can only that he thinks that he's so twisted in his mind that he thinks the only way he can kind of exist in this type of world of like of free spirited other kind of really Dionysian like sensual Italians and all these people and like these very world traveling type people, swashbuckling type of people, like is the only way is if he puts on a mask and veils himself from being the real Tom Ripley into being somebody else. So that's what I think is so. Again, spoiler alert. Near the end of the novel, he's able to make it seem like Dickie killed himself because Dickie felt awful about um, not being good enough, and never, uh, especially to his father, and eventually the police are able to buy that, surprisingly, and it's like, um, Marge too, and they're able to buy that Freddie Miles and murder was just somebody, because he was like able to kind of put alcohol down his throat to show that he was like a little bit on the drunk side, what on the report or toxicology report, and finally he's able to get off scot free in the end, and that's the I guess the kind of the tragic thing is like you both want him to kind of be like you. It's written in such a way that you kind of side with him, or that you are deep by default almost, but at the same time you're very very wary and you're very very. It's like I felt a little bit icky. It's like dang it, I just want him to get caught already. I just want him to get damn it, just throw him in jail, like to get because I think like it's just a little bit too. But then again, who knows? Like maybe there is cases of this where people are that good where they could get it, literally just get away with it. Um, so yeah, at the end he's ends up being very rich, and and even like Herbert Greenleaf is at the end. He's like, "Thank you so much for taking care of my son. You were a good person to him." And personally, that's for me. It's like I wouldn't be able to live with that. Like the guilt of it. But it's like I guess Thomas Ripley is just able to keep and it's almost in a comical sense of covering up, and then having to in the movie. That's another thing with the movie. Um, Not to go on and on and on about it, but it seemed like it was almost like it funny, although in a morbid kind of way, that they were able to kind of that Tom Ripley was had to kill somebody in order to kill somebody in order to, he had to kill somebody to cover up one aspect of the crime, and then he accidentally got on the dirt where he would actually kind of spill the beans and have to do it again, and then it finally ends with him like killing his only lover at the end of the novel or at the end of the movie. The book, that it's just like the two murders. He kills just Freddie and um, Dickie Greenleaf, obviously. So yeah, I thought that was interesting that um, that he seemed willing at any point if he needed to be like to kill the next person. He, like scarily so. So yeah, at the end of the novel, he's he gets off scot free, and basically he's like imagining that there's like some subtle paranoia that he has, that he's imagining that the police are still after him, and he sees them like on like every pier that they approach, like and then finally he just brushes it off, and then you know carries on his merry way. So yeah, talented Mr. Ripley. So really great read, and yeah, thank you for watching.